Greetings, 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 everybody. I would like to introduce you all to not one, but two exceptionally gifted musicians, Chuck Harmony and Claude Kelly, who are collectively known as Louis York. They have written, arranged, and produced for some of the biggest names in music, such as Tony Braxton, Whitney Houston, and Michael Jackson, and the list goes on and on and on. So while on the channel we tend to focus on singers a lot, it's equally important to understand and appreciate the creative process that goes into making all the songs that we know and love. Please welcome Louis York to the channel. Greetings.
Hey, 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 happy to be here.
Thank you. And I'm happy to have you. So as I just mentioned, a lot of my background is in voice and singing and everything. And so I'm really excited to learn a lot from you guys about the art of producing and just that side of everything. So just to start off, what is production? Because I feel like that term is very you used very loosely, or it's a broad term. So what is production?
I think production is the musical elements that supports a composition, a song. And that's by any means necessary. A lot of times, like people get production confused with making a track or making a beat, but it's not really that. Production is being responsible for the whole finished product.
So are there different types of production you'd see?
Yeah, I mean, production varies by genre. It varies by the genre.
By soundscape. Like, people come from different areas and need different kind of sounds to express themselves. But I think the job of, this is my opinion, the job of producer is not just to make cool sounds. It's to oversee the mood of the entire song. And whatever sounds, or lack of sounds for that matter, it requires to get the point across. That's what the producer's job is. That's what production is for. While the singer is focused on being the singer, while the soloist is focused on being the soloist, the producer is concerned about making sure the whole world around it is telling the same story that we all want to get across. It's actually a much harder job than people understand. A lot harder. I think everyone gets up on making beats, but to be a producer, you have to have vision and skill and musicality and taste and know when to push and when to stop. So it's not easy.
How does the voice play into that soundscape?
Well, the voice is, listen, the voice is our, as for us as human beings, that's our instrument that's built in, right? It's inside of us. If nothing else, you can make a noise with your voice. It's up to different people whether that voice sounds pretty or not, but you can make a noise with your voice. Not all music is vocal, but when it is vocal, Chuck and I are big fans of great singers. Singers that know how to tell a story. And so that when I say great, I don't mean the best singers, I mean the ones that know how to take you somewhere and tell you a story. A great singer is Tracy Chapman. A great singer is Sade. A great singer is Whitney Houston. A great singer is Jasmine Sullivan. A great singer is Mary J. Blige. It's people that tell stories and make you feel something. And it's the job of the singer to tell the story, but it's the job of everyone else to make sure the singer has the space to tell the story and lead it.
You both made a good point that a lot of people think production is just limited to making beats. Do you think producers, at least if they work with, singers, should have some knowledge of singing or the voice?
I do. I think with the producer being the leader in the recording process and getting the finished product together, I think they should have some knowledge about it all. They should know how to guide the singer to the best vocal performance. They should know how to guide the engineer to the best mix. They should know how to guide the musicians to the best instrumental performances. And so they definitely should know something about singing, because singing is usually the primary instrument. That's the primary. That's why we all here to hear what they're saying and singing. So they should definitely have some knowledge of that.
That's a good point. Okay, so when I was going through you guys' output, I'm actually pretty familiar with a lot of you guys' work. I noticed there's a lot of uh producing for the female voice and the female singers. I personally myself prefer female voices, but do you guys prefer the female voice, or is that just what comes or what has come to you?
I definitely prefer the female voice. It's a lot of male voices even when they're good, you know what I'm saying? Like they just don't jive with how my soul wants to
With
hear,
your soul.
how my soul wants to hear music. You know what I'm saying? And so a lot of times, whether it's commercial music or non-commercial music, like meditation music, I tend to listen to the female voices over the male voices. So
Same for me. Same for me. I mean, at some, I love all. There's plenty of male singers I love as well, but I have a soft spot, a weakness for the female voice. It's just the most beautiful when it's done right. It's the most beautiful thing in the world.
yeah,
It's just the most heartfelt, beautiful thing in the world.
And I sort of kind of feel like to some extent, there's a little bit more variety among female voices.
Yes.
And so speaking of that variety, so you've produced for someone like Anastasia. Anastasia's voice is completely opposite of, say, like a Tony Braxton, who sounds completely different from Oriana, who sounds different from Leandria. So how do you give all of these voices, all of these women, different spaces to do what they do or craft a sound that allows them to succeed?
I think it just has to be tailor made to what you think that artist's voice will sound best on. You know what I'm saying? Like with Anastasia, that was when I was first coming into business. And so I didn't have that much knowledge about her voice, but once the record label sent me stuff with her voice on it, I knew that it should be that. It should be that dancey with the big voice on top of it. That's what I knew. That's what I thought should be the case, and so that's what I gave. And so you just have to tailor make it. I think producers do artists such a disservice by just giving them all the same music. Like who, you know what I'm saying? Like if that worked for Aaliyah, it's definitely not gonna work for Leandria. So why would you give it to her? So I think that's the disconnect in producing, and hopefully that'll be fixed.
And that's the difference between a beat maker and a producer, because a beat maker will make like a whole 15, 30 tracks with a sound patch that they found they love, and they're all kind of similar, maybe similar tempo or the same sounds with different tempos. And then it's just like every artist's job to try and fit into that box and hope that their voice works or that song works for them. That's one way to do it. And I'm not saying it hasn't worked for us. It's worked for many people. That's just not our style.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like it's being bespoke to the artist. So we don't have a whole computer full of tracks that sound the same. And then if someone calls, we throw it at them. If Leandria calls, then we go into the studio and we make something that sounds perfect for Leandria. And then the day after that, Rihanna calls, we're not even thinking about them sounds we used yesterday for Leandria. We're like, what works best for Rihanna today? And then so on and so forth. So every single song that you heard from us and every song you will hear from us is a one-of-a-kind creation for the artist, their mood, that time of life they're in, and what we think is necessary for the world at that time. There's no imitation of our stuff or anyone else's in that way. It's really an original.
And speaking of that, of all those things and just all these different sounds and songs that you guys have created, outside of the producing, how involved are you in arranging the vocal as well?
It's 100% over involved. The vocal production is the next most important thing behind the production itself. The same question you asked Chuck is the same that goes for vocals. I think songwriters should know how to vocal produce and should know how to at least carry enough of a tune to get across how they want a song to sound. If not, be able to add some colors themselves so they can make it what they hear in their head. So every artist who's ever worked with me and Chuck will tell you about the experience they had being vocal produced by Louis York, which is an experience because we don't play. We don't play. And I mean, when I say we don't play, I mean, it's the same kind of serious when we're in the studio with Leandria as it is with the Shambellas, as it is with any artist that that's on the roster. Like, they know they're coming into work. They come in sweats and a bottle of water because they know we're about to do some work in here today because I'm going to get the best out of them. Because a record, right, is 2 to 4 or 5 minutes of a demonstration of someone's best possible scenario. So I don't want the half-ass version. He doesn't want the half-ass version. When he's putting his all into the production and playing his ass off and producing and arranging strings and drums, then we want you to come in here and give your all so we can say this is 3 minutes of the best Leandria you ever heard.
Do certain instruments or certain sounds work better with certain type of voices?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Definitely. A good example of that was when I worked with Jasmine Sullivan on Forever Don't Last. I just knew that her voice would sound so good with acoustic guitar, and I never understood why nobody had ever did that because, you know what I'm saying, that the earthiness of her voice with the acoustic guitar, I just knew that would be perfect. And so I do believe that, you know what I'm saying, some people sound good on certain instruments.
Yeah.
Hopefully you can sound good on anything, but some people sound better on different instruments for sure.
Because you guys have worked with some of these singers, male and female, multiple times. How do you produce for like a singer who can't do what they used to be able to do back then? You know, because, you know, singers' voices change, you know, so how do you produce for that voice to make them still sound like what we are accustomed to?
I worked on Whitney Houston's last album, and her voice on her last album wasn't anywhere near her voice when on Bodyguard and Waiting to Exhale and all that stuff beforehand. But the sessions that I had with Whitney Houston, she knew to come in like vocally clean. She was drinking water, drinking tea because she had heard this guy was going to come in and vocal producer. And within the limitations of what her voice was on those days, I pushed her to make sure that it sounded the best. And afterwards, I spent a lot of time making sure that it was timed right and blended really well. So you just do your best with whatever the artist comes with. There's some artists that never have a big range, and you have to make them sound good. There's some artists that don't sing that great at all, but they're well-known artists, and you have to make them sound good. And so you coach them with positivity, and you also coach them with some seriousness to make sure that they know that you have their back and that you're looking for the best, and then you just do the best work afterwards to make it sound polished. Producing, people don't understand this. Producing and vocal producing, both of those, hours and hours and hours and days of work. The session might be 2 hours, maybe 5 hours. That extra time is probably 48 hours.
Yeah,
48 whole hours of work. So it's to be respected because it's a hard job, and not everyone can do it, and not everyone's good at it.
So when you guys are working with these artists, you're in the space with you.
Absolutely. I mean, 99% of the time we're in the studio with the artists. And very rarely are they recording without us. Usually they want us to be in the studio because they trust our ear and our guidance. But yeah, the songs you've heard from us, we recorded those. We wrote them for those people. There's experiences and memories from all those sessions. Crazy stories and stuff, but the truth is that we're hands-on in every way.
You guys have produced for so many other people. And I was just listening to your latest work, Heaven Bound. And something that struck me upon first listen was, oh, wow, this sounds vintage. And I like that. But it sounds fresh and modern. So I'm not sure if that was the intention, but how do you guys balance those kinds of sounds?
Yeah, I mean, for Heaven Bound specifically, that was definitely an intention there's some nostalgia to the synth line that I used in the beginning of the song and the way the guitar is moving, that kind of hippie 70s kind of guitar. That was definitely intentional. But the modernness is me being myself and Claude being himself as we continue to build from that. You know what I'm saying? So you get a little nostalgia. That's just the inspiration. Whatever we go in the studio, be like, yeah, we should do. You know what I'm saying? We should do this kind of record. We should do this kind of feel. So it's gonna have a little of that nostalgia in it, but we definitely are original in our thinking, and so that's where the modernness comes.
Yeah,
How important is it for a producer to know like what makes up the music, like the theory of it?
Mm. My preference is that everybody would know what it's the music business, so you should know music. Unfortunately, I think with commercial music, it's so driven by so many other factors that a person's knowledge of the craft is not put on display in a real way, and especially in popular music. But I definitely I feel like the world would be a better place, and I feel like the music business would be a better, more thorough business if people that are responsible for the music part really understood music.
I think that's it's literally the most, not your question, but I think that the fact that it even is a question is the most ridiculous thing. No other profession that is probably even existing where that question would have to be asked. You would never ask a doctor, do you feel like you need to know medicine before you can start practicing medicine? Of course you have to know medicine.
Right.
If a surgeon, if you go to a restaurant and the chef in the background doesn't have any experience of food, would you want to eat from that chef? So it's even ridiculous that we have an industry where there's an option to not know what you're doing. That's ridiculous.
Right.
Everything else in life that you employed people for, you hired people for, you expect expertise. So it's just kind of embarrassing from an industry standpoint. And that's even a question that we have to debate, because if you say you're a musician, you should know music.
Because, and the reason I ask that is because, I can name a few songs that have been released in the past year, 2 years, that all have used the exact same sample to bank on that same feeling of nostalgia. So my question is, like, when referencing a song like Heaven Bound, which is meant to remind you of a certain time, how do you draw off that, say, that influence, but still take that from familiar sound, but yet crafted into something original?
To me, it's as simple as like trusting your own instincts. You know what I'm saying? Because just like everybody has their own voice, like singing voice, everybody has their own voice. If you're true to your voice as output, your output of music, like my output of music would be different from your output of music because you speak you got another voice. And so trusting those instincts, I just think you get to a real original place, which is what Heaven Bound got to. It got to an original place, even though the feel of it might have been nostalgic. It got really original really fast because we were trusting our instincts through the process.
And so speaking of Heaven Bound, is it part of a larger project?
Yes, of course. Louis doesn't do anything small. So we have a whole album coming called Songs with Friends. And it's a duet album, majority duets on the album with our real deal friends, people that we work with, love, respect, want to show more love to, and that the world should show more love to. So, and it's a wide variety. I mean, you know our discography, so it's not one genre. It's a lot of that. We never like being in boxes, so this album is no different. It's Jesse J, Anthony Hamilton. Well, I'm not gonna give them all away, but Jesse J, Anthony Hamilton, Chris Daughtry, PJ Morton, Tamia, Layla Hathaway. So you get like people that we really loved and worked and respected, but they are also bringing them into the Louis York sound, the Louis York world, and what we call No American Soul. So it's what you love about them, but also combine with what you love about us to create something that's brand new.
So what inspired you guys to make a duet album?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, we like to fill in the gaps where things are missing. Real duets, not just manufactured because everybody got a fan base and you're just trying to steal people's fan bases, but real duets with real friends, real collaborators. And we also worked with people that we really, really respected musically. Mm-hmm. So that those two entities coming together can't help but make something great. Duets is a real thing, it's a lot of them that took us through our lives, that made a mark on our lives. So we want to be a part of that conversation as well.
because I'm always because I listen to a lot of opera, as I mentioned. That's one of my that's actually my background. And I noticed like composers in opera will use certain instruments for certain words or certain songs or whatever. And so since you guys are doing everything, like when you're writing or when you're making melodies, or do you keep all of these things in mind, or do they just come together? Like, how does everything come together?
You said the magic word for me, which is composer. Because I would consider us composers. In fact, I think on one of our social hour headlines is modern composer of the 21st century. Because it's not really about chasing the trends, it's about making new trends. A producer, a beat maker, a track maker is making something with the sounds that are given to them now. A composer builds a whole soundscape in the world with whatever they have at their disposal to push things forward. Chuck and I relate a lot to Oscar and Hammerstein because they are literally composers of Broadway musicals that are now standards, right? And I think his name gets thrown around a lot kind of loosely, but people talk about Quincy Jones just because they know he's dope from doing Michael Jackson. But the reason Quincy Jones is a brilliant composer is for the same reason I think we are going down that lane, is that he's worked with so many different kinds of artists and built a soundscape for them that you wouldn't even realize it. The same guy did Michael Jackson, did Frank Sinatra. The same guy that Frank Sinatra did Donna Summer at one point, and Sarah Vaughan, and list goes on and on and on. That's what a composer does. That's what Chuck does. And that's not normal. That's not normal. That's a lot of these things are stuff that if you're, I don't say lazy, but if you don't care about it, you can just find those sounds on the computer. You could buy those sounds on the computer. And I'm not saying it won't sound good enough, but will it sound unforgettable? Right. Will it change your life when you hear it? And that's what a composer does. And then to make room with all that in your head for where the singer goes, and the lyrics have to matter, and the singer's interpretation of it has to be accounted for, is a level of skill that I'm telling you that people don't really understand the complexity of that. It's not one dimensional, it's 10-dimensional. Besides the orchestra conductor, that's the only thing I can think of that compares to it, is that having to manage all those sounds and worlds and make it sound like something. It's brilliant. And so the amount of people that can do it are few, but I'm just lucky that I get to work every day with someone that can do that.
And so the last question that I have, just to wind things down. So, for example, say someone like, since we mentioned her, Whitney Houston, how involved are they in the production aspect when you guys are all working together, or does it vary by artist?
It varies by artist. It depends on their level of musicality and their instrumental skill. Like you have some artists that really play piano, and so they have a perspective of how they want the piano to sound because that's part of their artistry, and so you have to respect that that's part of what they're bringing to the table. The artists that play guitar and the artists that really, really write. Not most, I mean, not saying most, but a lot of artists are not great writers, but the ones that are, pretty quickly. And so it becomes an equal collaboration in the room. But
we actually love to hear from artists. We love for them to have
a perspective
on music, on lyrics, on style. We love that because we're making it for them. You know what I'm saying? We want that.
Only time I feel compelled to speak up, or he feels compelled to speak up, is if you're fucking up the song.
Basically,
you cannot fuck up the song. That is a cardinal rule. So, and if I'm doing it, he'll say that you're going too far, and vice versa. So, if we hold ourselves accountable to that, we're going to hold anyone who comes into the room with us accountable. Whitney Houston, I'm down. Like, we're not afraid to tell anyone, Beyonce, Whitney Houston, whoever, like, we're not feeling that. Because what else is there to stand on besides your conviction about your art?
Thank you. I've learned a lot from this conversation. You see, I got a big smile on my face because I always enjoy learning so much, So thank you for coming here and just sharing a wealth of knowledge. And I can't wait to share this with the viewers.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us, man.